What if Mary, the Mother of God, was not merely a humble servant, but a divine figure rooted in ancient cosmic wisdom, stripped of her true identity by the very institution that claims to honor her? What if the image of the quiet veiled mother was designed to hide something far more powerful, something the Vatican never wanted you to remember? For centuries we have been told the story of the Virgin Mary in one voice, a pure girl chosen by God, blessed to carry the Son, obedient, passive, silent. But this figure sculpted by Doctrine does not match the deeper currents of history, myth, and symbolism. Because before Mary was ever called blessed, she was something far older. Across the ancient world, a sacred archetype, the Divine Mother, the cosmic womb, was venerated under many names. Isis, Inanna, Sophia, Asherah, and in their temples under stars and candlelight, the earliest humans whispered prayers to her, long before the Church gave her a new name. This is where your journey begins, not with a virgin in Nazareth, but with a celestial queen encoded in stone and myth. What the Vatican never told you is that Mary was not born in silence. She was transformed into it. Before the councils and creeds, before her image was softened and veiled, Mary stood as an echo of the Great Mother who had always been there. In pre-Christian times, the Mediterranean world was rich with goddess worship. The people of Egypt, Babylon, and Canaan understood divinity not as male alone, but as a cosmic balance. The divine feminine was present in temples, in art, in myth. Isis, the mother of Horus, was called Queen of Heaven. She nursed her child God upon a throne. Sound familiar? Her iconography, crowned with stars holding her infant, was later absorbed, rebranded, and Christianized. But the essence of the mother remained. Now consider this: the oldest churches of Christianity were built upon former goddess temples. The Basilica of the Annunciation, once sacred to Artemis. The Shrine of Guadalupe, Pupti, overlaid upon a site for Tonantzin, an Aztec mother deity. These were not coincidences. They were acts of theological conquest. The divine feminine was not destroyed. It was repackaged, hidden under doctrine, made safe. The Virgin Mary in her current form is not the beginning of a new tradition, but the end of a long line of sacred remembrance. But this begs the question, who was Mary before the Bible wrote her into history? Some clues lie in her names. Mariam, a name that may trace to the Egyptian Mariamun, meaning beloved of Amun. Or perhaps to the Hebrew Miriam, sister of Moses, who led women in prophetic song. Mary's name is a riddle of languages hinting at water rebellion, exaltation, sorrow. Her name carries mythological echoes that span generations, linking her not just to one man, Jesus, but to a lineage of sacred women. And there's more. Early Christian communities did not all view Mary the same way. To some Gnostic sects, she was not merely the mother of Jesus, but a divine emanation, a vessel for Sophia, the feminine wisdom of God. These texts, buried and burned, spoke of a higher reality, that the feminine was not passive, but active in salvation. That Mary's role was not just to bear the light, but to be the light. This is why the Church grew afraid. A Mary connected to Isis, a Mary that carried Sophia, a Mary remembered by the mystics as the bridge between heaven and earth. This was a Mary too powerful to control. The councils could not allow such freedom, and so they placed her in a box, ever virgin, ever silent, ever obedient. They told you she was sacred, but only within the boundaries they defined. But step outside that frame. Return to the desert paths, the temple chants, the ancient statues worn by time. You'll see her hidden in plain sight. Her symbol is the moon. Her number is 13. Her color is deep blue. She walks with serpents, and she dreams in stars. And once you begin to look beyond what you've been told, you'll feel her presence rising. Because the truth is, Mary's story was never meant to be confined to one book, one gospel, one church. It was meant to echo across ages as a key to the mysteries that unite heaven and earth. She was never merely a mother. She was and is the embodiment of divine memory, the soul of a wisdom long buried beneath stone and silence, and now you are beginning to remember. She was once called Queen of Heaven, not by accident, not as poetic flattery, but as a title, ancient, terrifying, and divine. But somewhere along the centuries, this crown was taken from her, quietly, strategically, as if history itself were rewritten with the ink of erasure. Why? Because the image of Mary as queen threatened the balance of power. In the earliest centuries of Christianity, Mary was venerated not just as the mother of Christ, but as a cosmic presence. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Christian art already depicted her enthroned radiant, surrounded by stars echoing Isis, the celestial mother. And yet, as the Church consolidated power, especially after the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, something subtle but devastating began. Mary's spiritual majesty was severed from her mythological roots. Her image, once expansive and mystical, was narrowed into a tool of orthodoxy. The title Queen of Heaven had an uncomfortable twin history. It appears in the Old Testament, most notably in Jeremiah, referring to a goddess condemned by Hebrew prophets. Scholars argue that this queen could have been Asherah, a divine consort of Yahweh, once worshipped in ancient Israel, until her memory was scrubbed from mainstream Judaism. The early church fathers, inheriting this fear of feminine divinity, recoiled from anything that might blur the masculine supremacy of God. So, they edited Mary, not with scissors and ink, but with silence. They preserved her motherhood but buried her sovereignty. They praised her humility while stripping her power. And in doing so, they created a contradiction. A woman revered by millions, yet officially voiceless, central to salvation's story, yet denied theological authority. The paradox of Mary became institutionalized, worshipped, but not heard, prayed to, but never speaking. But here's the mystery the people remembered. Across Europe, from the Black Madonnas of France to the secret iconography of medieval cathedrals, Mary appeared again and again with forbidden symbols. She was crowned with 12 stars, the zodiac. She stood upon the crescent moon lunar cycle's ancient femininity. In some renditions, she crushed a serpent beneath her feet, but the serpent itself is a symbol that predates Christianity, associated with wisdom healing and divine awakening. The church insisted she was pure, but artists kept drawing her in robes of deep indigo, the color of the night sky, the unseen. Sculptors placed her in thrones once used for pagan goddesses. Her shrines were built over sacred wells and groves, holy places long associated with the feminine divine. Why would these symbols persist unless people felt something deeper? Unless something within the collective soul remembered? In secret, the mystics kept her alive. In Kabbalistic traditions, she became associated with the Shekhinah, the feminine presence of God dwelling in the world. In alchemy, she was linked to the divine container, the vessel of transformation. And among the Gnostics, Mary was never just the mother of Jesus. She was the hidden partner in the great cosmic drama, the vessel of divine gnosis, the one who knew. Even church dogma couldn't fully extinguish this. In 431 AD, the Council of Ephesus declared Mary Theotokos, God-bearer, not just mother of the human Jesus, but mother of the divine Logos. It was a moment of accidental truth, a crack in the marble of control. And yet, it was quickly managed. Her divine maternity was acknowledged only in service to Christ's nature, not as her own sacred identity. But still she rose. The faithful, especially women, clung to her image in ways the church could not predict. During plagues, war, and oppression, people turned not to priests, but to Mary. They saw in her the one who understood suffering, the one who felt, the one who was with them when God seemed far away, and perhaps deep in the bones of memory they sensed something older than Bethlehem, older than Nazareth, something eternal. But the church, wary of this uncontainable affection, began to define boundaries. Marian apparitions were investigated, judged, and either condemned or approved, always by male authorities. Dogmas were proclaimed like the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption, but always without her voice. Mary became a paradox once more, elevated in rhetoric, yet controlled in meaning. What the Vatican never told you is that Mary's image was edited to serve institutional stability. Her voice was removed so that Doctrine could speak in her place. Her symbols were co-opted. Her shrines sanitized, her mystery rationalized. But her essence, her spiritual resonance remained. Because symbols are not so easily buried, the Queen of Heaven still walks among us, not in cathedrals alone, but in dreams, visions, synchronicities, in the face of every woman who rises in wisdom, in the silent moments when the soul yearns for a mother beyond time. You were never meant to forget her. And now, as the veils lift, you begin to see the Mary of official dogma is but a shadow. The real Mary Queen Goddess Oracle waits beneath the centuries, beneath the marble and incense, beneath the page and the prayer. And she is still crowned with stars. Imagine this Mary not just as a mother in a manger, but as an initiate of ancient temples, walking the stone corridors of Egypt, eyes lifted to stars that whispered forgotten truths. What if her silence was not ignorance, but discipline? What if the Virgin Mother was not only chosen by heaven, but trained in its mysteries long before Gabriel's announcement? This is the part of Mary's life the Bible does not tell you. The decades before the Gospels open. A time shrouded in quiet, yet overflowing with possibility. Because Mary's story does not begin in Bethlehem, it begins in the wisdom schools of a world long buried beneath empire and doctrine. Let us travel back farther than the church dares look. To Egypt, the womb of mystery. There for thousands of years divine knowledge was passed down not through books, but through initiation rituals designed to awaken the soul to its celestial origin. The priests and priestesses of Isis did not worship blindly. They studied the structure of the soul, the cycles of the stars, the power of sacred sound and symbol. They did not separate science from spirit, and among them were women keepers of light vessels of wisdom, anointed not for obedience, but for transformation. Mary, it is said in certain mystical traditions, was one of them. Though canonical texts are silent, the apocryphal and esoteric voices tell a different tale. The Gospel of the birth of Mary, rejected by Rome, describes her being raised in the temple, fed by angels, and surrounded by mystery from her earliest years. Jewish mystical texts, too, speak of women set apart by divine radiance. Could it be that Mary was not simply chosen at random, but prepared from childhood not to receive a miracle, but to understand it? Even the very act of her conception without sin begins to sound like the language of initiation. Not a biological anomaly, but a sign of spiritual purity, honed by sacred training. Now look again at Egypt. The goddess Isis was the prototype of the sacred feminine. Her story was known across the ancient world: the loving wife, the grieving mother, the magical healer who resurrected the god Osiris and gave birth to Horus, the divine child. Her temples, especially in Alexandria and Dendera, were active centers of knowledge well into the 1st century BCE, just decades before Mary's time. It was in Alexandria that Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek. It was there that the early fusion of Egyptian Greek and Hebrew wisdom gave rise to the Kabbalistic and Gnostic streams. It is not far-fetched to imagine Mary living in Galilee, a crossroads of trade and culture, being influenced by this swirl of ancient knowledge. Nazareth itself, a small but spiritually rich village, was surrounded by Essene communities, mystics who practiced ritual bathing, sacred fasting, celestial prophecy. And some Gnostic accounts speak of Mary being educated in divine matters from a young age, able to see the angel not as a shocking event, but as the next step in a spiritual unfolding she already understood. The Annunciation then becomes not a disruption, but a culmination. Think of Gabriel's words, "You are full of grace." That phrase in its original Greek kechaitomena implies not a passive blessing, but an active state of inner fullness. Mary was not a blank canvas. She was already full, already radiant, already prepared to hold the divine within her, just as Isis had done, just as Inanna had done, just as Sophia, the divine wisdom, was said to dwell among men in ancient scripture. But the Vatican over time took this spiritual richness and flattened it. Mary became a vessel, but not a voice, a mother, but not a mystic. Her silence was glorified, but never explained. Yet the symbols survived. The halos, the blue robes, the secret gestures in iconography that match those of Isis and Hathor and the temple priestesses of old. And even in official Catholic doctrine, subtle echoes remain. Consider the rosary, a repeated prayer, a mantra-like invocation, each bead a rhythm, a spiral, a return to the center. This is not new. This is ancient. Egyptian and Hindu practices also used prayer beads. The act of repetitive prayer was designed to enter trance, to ascend spiritually. The Church preserved the form, but not the reason. And think of the Magnificat Mary's own hymn, "My soul magnifies the Lord." These are not words of a submissive girl. These are the words of one who knows she is a bridge between heaven and earth, a divine mirror, a cosmic echo. She speaks not as one surprised, but as one awakened. So why has the Vatican never taught you this? Because to acknowledge Mary as an initiate, as a conscious participant in divine mystery, would overturn centuries of control. It would restore sacred femininity, not as an accessory, but as a source. It would connect her to Isis, to Sophia, to the Shekhinah. And it would force the Church to admit the divine feminine was never erased by accident. It was erased by design, but memory returns. And when you begin to see Mary not just as mother, but as mystic, everything changes. The manger becomes a symbol of the soul's birth. The angel becomes a voice of inner awakening. The silence becomes sacred listening. And the question begins to form within you, what else have we forgotten? What if Mary was meant to speak, but her words were silenced? What if the Gospels we know are only fragments, shadows of a deeper light that once revealed her full role? Not just as mother of Jesus, but as bearer of wisdom, equal to him, a mirror of the Christ light. This is the forbidden heart of Christian history, the hidden texts, the banned scriptures, the buried scrolls, that dared to tell a different story. A story where Mary was not on the sidelines, but at the center. A story where feminine consciousness was not incidental, but essential to the divine mission. And this story begins with a collection of texts buried for centuries, hidden from the eyes of the faithful. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in Egypt in 1945, unveiled lost Gospels that changed everything. Among them, the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, the Sophia of Jesus Christ. And in them, Mary does not simply grieve or witness, she teaches. She challenges Peter. She comforts the disciples. She receives visions that even they cannot comprehend. In the Gospel of Mary, found in fragile fragments, but burning with light, Mary recounts a revelation given to her by Jesus, not after his birth, but after his resurrection. She speaks of the soul's ascent through cosmic realms of secret passwords of higher knowledge forbidden to the uninitiated. The male disciples recoil. Peter, ever the voice of authority, questions, did he really speak to a woman in private? And Mary calmly affirms her vision. Levi rebukes Peter. If the Savior made her worthy, who are you to reject her? This moment is seismic. It implies that Mary was not just a witness to the Christ, she was a vessel of his hidden teachings, a bearer of gnosis, that sacred knowledge which awakens the soul from illusion. She was not simply honored, she was chosen. But chosen for what? To carry the other half of the message. The teachings of Jesus, as preserved in canonical Gospels, focus on parables, miracles, and redemption through faith. But the Gnostic texts reveal another layer, a mystical path of inner awakening. And Mary in these scriptures is shown to embody the Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom that descended into matter and seeks to return to the light. This is not metaphor. In ancient symbolic systems, Sophia is the soul of the world, the spark of God trapped in creation. She falls into forgetfulness, but yearns to ascend. Does this not echo the fall of Eve, recast not as sin, but as a spiritual descent? And does Mary not then become the restored Eve, the one who reclaims the feminine divinity and brings it into union with the Christ? And now we begin to see the Church could not allow this narrative. Because if Mary was Sophia, If she understood the mysteries of soul cosmos and resurrection, then truth did not belong to Peter or Paul or the councils, but to the awakened few, male and female alike. Authority would no longer rest in Rome, but in the human heart, and that is the greatest heresy of all. And so Mary's voice was silenced, her gospels burned, her wisdom labeled heretical, but it could not be erased completely. The echoes remained, in hidden monasteries, in art, in the sacred silence of mystics who continued to feel her presence, in medieval paintings where Mary holds a book, not a Bible, but a codex of secrets, in Eastern icons where her hand points upward, not down, inviting the soul to rise, in apocryphal legends where she ascends not only bodily but spiritually, just as Jesus did, a parallel light. Even the Church's declaration of her assumption, her bodily ascension into heaven, hints at something deeper. Why would a mere human woman receive such a fate, unless she was more than we have been told? Some early traditions even speak of Mary Magdalene and the Virgin Mary as two faces of the same principle, one embodying sacred knowledge, the other divine receptivity. In this view, they are not rivals, but aspects of the whole feminine mystery that Jesus walked beside, the Magdalene the seeker, the Virgin the vessel. Both silenced, both misunderstood, both now returning. And here is the question the Vatican cannot answer. Why does the Church fear a Mary who remembers, a Mary who knew the stars and their rhythms, a Mary who understood the soul's descent and ascent, a Mary who was not passive but prophetic? Because such a Mary changes everything. She reveals that the message of Christ was not submission to external power, but union with inner light. That salvation is not obedience, but awakening. That the soul is not to be controlled, but remembered. And perhaps, that Mary was not just the mother of Jesus, but the keeper of his flame. The one who understood what even Peter did not. The one who remained when others fled. The one who kept the divine feminine alive through centuries of forgetting. And now that memory returns not as doctrine, but as recognition. You've felt it, haven't you? That pull soft, ancient, undeniable. The sense that something is missing from the story. That behind the stained glass and the gold leaf dogma, there's a whisper of a woman calling. Not the quiet virgin, not the voiceless icon, but her, the lost mother, the cosmic mirror, the queen. Because Mary, the real Mary, was never just a figure in someone else's gospel. She was the gospel hidden within you. And now she is awakening again. In dreams, in signs, in forgotten symbols that refuse to stay buried. All around the world we are seeing her return, but not as the gentle statue on a church shelf. She comes as thunder in the soul, as remembrance, as a face we once knew before history rewrote her. Take the rise of the Black Madonnas, mysterious dark-skinned images of Mary found in cathedrals across Europe. The Church has no clear explanation for them, but mystics know. These are not accidents. They are echoes of the older feminine, earthy, powerful, uncontainable. Representations of Mary as the womb of mystery, untamed by dogma. Or consider the apparitions Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe. Each time she appears not in Vatican halls, but to shepherds' children, indigenous people. Always outside the hierarchy, always beyond control. And her messages urgent, cosmic, transformative. Speaking not of submission, but of awakening, of returning to the heart, of seeing through the illusions of power. In 1531, she appeared as Our Lady of Guadalupe, cloaked in stars standing atop a crescent moon exactly as Isis once stood. She called herself the mother of all who live on this earth, not Catholics, not only believers, all. She defied the boundaries of theology, and the people felt it. That same sacred current that once flowed from Egypt to Jerusalem now surged again. This is the Mary the Vatican never wanted you to know. Not because she contradicts Jesus, but because she completes him. Because to truly know Mary is to awaken something buried not only in Scripture, but in you. It's to remember that the sacred is not male alone, that God is not a king upon a throne, but a flame within the womb, within the soul, within the breath of life itself. Mary is the mirror of this truth, and it is through her re-emergence that a new age of spiritual balance may begin. She teaches not with sermons, but with silence that speaks, not with rules, but with presence, not with control, but with invitation. She is Sophia. She is Isis. She is Shekhinah. She is the missing piece in a theology built on exclusion. She is the lost song of creation, sung not in Latin, but in the language of dream symbols and soul. And as you walk this path now more awake than when you began, you may begin to see her everywhere, in every image of a mother holding a child, in every act of compassion, in every dream that feels older than memory. But more than that, you may begin to feel her within. The true Virgin Mary does not demand belief. She invites remembrance, not to obey, but to awaken, not to kneel, but to rise. Because you are the temple now, the secret place where heaven and earth meet, the living gospel still being written. And so the question remains not who was Mary, but who are you now that you remember her? Could it be that the divine feminine never left, but simply waited until you were ready? Could it be that the truth hidden for 2,000 years was never lost, only sleeping beneath your skin? Could it be that Mary is not just a mother, but a call to wholeness, a return to balance, a whisper from the stars reminding you, you are more than you've been told. The Vatican cannot silence her anymore. The cathedrals cannot contain her. The councils cannot define her. She was always beyond them, and now she returns, not in doctrine, but in the deepest part of your knowing. And so the journey doesn't end. It begins again, because the greatest truth about Mary may not be what she did 2,000 years ago, but what she awakens in you now. Let her rise. Let her light break through the veils. Let her memory become your own. Let the Queen return not to a throne, but to your heart.